Every parent's worst nightmare became one little girl's reality. When 7-year-old Keisha was found locked in a cage by her own father, it broke hearts across the nation. Millionaire entrepreneur Elijah Brown couldn't turn away from the news report. He immediately rescued Keisha and adopted her, offering a life filled with love and opportunity. What started as a beautiful redemption story quickly turned dangerous. Keisha, quote,'s father wasn't just abusive, he was connected to a criminal syndicate, with ties to Elijah's own hidden past. As buried secrets surface and dark forces close in, both find themselves caught in a web of danger they never saw coming. But what happens when the very people you're trying to escape become the key to your own survival? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Elijah Brown's penthouse office, high above Seattle's bustling downtown. At 42, he had built an empire from nothing. Brown Tech Solutions employed over 3,000 people and had revolutionized cybersecurity for Fortune 500 companies. Yet as he stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, coffee growing cold, in his hands, success felt hollow. The framed military citation on his desk caught the light, a reminder of the man he used to be before suits and board meetings. For exceptional valor in classified operations, the Bronze Star read, though the details remained locked away in government files. Most people knew Elijah as the tech mogul who'd risen from poverty in Detroit's East Side. Few knew about the 8 years he'd spent in special operations, or the brothers he'd lost in missions that officially never happened. The notification chime from his phone interrupted his reflection. Marcus Webb, his head of security and closest friend from their military days, had sent him a news link with the message, "You need to see this." Elijah's chest tightened as he watched the report. A ramshackle house on the outskirts of Portland. Police officers carrying a small, malnourished child wrapped in a blanket. The reporter's voice was steady, but the horror was unmistakable. 7-year-old Keisha Williams had been found locked in a makeshift cage in her father's basement. Neighbors reported hearing crying, but assumed it was an animal. She'd been there for months, possibly years. The father, Raymond Williams, had fled when police arrived. The child was alone, terrified, barely able to speak. No other family had been located. She would enter the foster care system within days. Elijah found himself reaching for his phone before he'd made a conscious decision. Within an hour, he was speaking with Detective Anna Rivera, the lead investigator on the case. Within 2 hours, his lawyers were drafting paperwork. By evening, he was sitting in Seattle Children's Hospital, waiting to meet a little girl whose story had shattered something inside him. Dr. Sarah Chen, the child psychologist assigned to Keisha's care, met him in the hallway. She was younger than he'd expected, perhaps 35, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the weary expression of someone who'd seen too much trauma in young lives. "Mr. Brown," she said, extending her hand, "I appreciate you coming so quickly. I have to ask, what's driving this decision? Adoption is a significant commitment, especially with a child who's experienced this level of trauma." Elijah chose his words carefully. "I grew up in foster care myself, Dr. Chen. I know what it's like to feel unwanted, to bounce between homes where you're just a monthly check. This child deserves better." It was true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was something he couldn't explain even to himself. A pull in his chest, a certainty that this little girl needed him as much as he needed to save her. Dr. Chen studied his face for a long moment. "Keisha hasn't spoken since we brought her in. She's severely malnourished and shows signs of prolonged psychological abuse. Recovery will take time, patience, and professional support, whatever she needs. The process isn't simple. Background checks, home studies, psychological evaluations, and given your high-profile status, there will be media attention. My lawyers are already handling the paperwork. My security team will manage the media. What I need to know is, will you help her heal? Something in his voice must have convinced her. Dr. Chen nodded and led him down the sterile hallway to a room where a small figure sat curled on a hospital bed, knees drawn to her chest. Keisha was tiny for 7. Malnutrition had stunted her growth. Her dark hair was matted, her skin bore the pale cast of someone who hadn't seen sunlight in too long, but it was her eyes that broke Elijah's heart. They held a wariness no child should possess, the hypervigilance of prey animal. Keisha, Doctor, Chen said softly, I'd like you to meet someone. This is Mr. Elijah. He came to visit you. The little girl's eyes flicked to Elijah briefly before returning to her hands. He took a step closer, then lowered himself into the chair beside her bed, making himself smaller, less threatening. Hi, Keisha, he said quietly. I heard you're very brave. No response, but her fingers stopped picking at the hospital blanket. I brought you something. He pulled a small teddy bear from his jacket pocket. Nothing fancy, just something soft and brown with gentle eyes. He placed it on the bed between them and waited. Long minutes passed in silence. Then, so gradually he almost missed it, one small hand reached out and touched the bear's fur. You can keep him if you want, Elijah said. He's looking for someone to take care of. The ghost of a smile flickered across Keisha's face before disappearing. It was enough. Over the following weeks, Elijah rearranged his entire life. The penthouse was child-proofed, though Keisha rarely moved from whatever corner felt safest. A team of specialists joined Dr. Chen, nutritionist, pediatrician, trauma counselor. Marcus quietly increased security measures, running background checks on everyone who came near the family. The legal process moved with unusual speed, helped by Elijah's resources and connections. More importantly, Keisha slowly began to trust. She kept the teddy bear constantly at her side. She started eating without coaxing. She let Dr. Chen examine her without crying. And she watched Elijah with those enormous, serious eyes, as if trying to figure out what he wanted from her. He made sure to want nothing more than her safety and happiness. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday evening, 6 weeks after the adoption was finalized. Elijah was working at his home office, door open so Keisha could see him from her favorite spot in the living room where she colored quietly for hours. He heard her small voice and looked up. Mr. Elijah. It was the first time she'd initiated conversation. He saved his work and walked over to where she sat cross-legged on the carpet, her drawing pad in her lap. Yes, sweetheart, I drew this for you. She held up the paper, a house with 2 stick figures standing in front, one tall, one very small. Both were smiling. It's beautiful, he said, accepting the drawing like the precious gift it was. Is this us? She nodded solemnly. This is home. Elijah felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking, but expanding. Yes, he said, kneeling down to her level. This is home. For the first time since he'd found success, since he'd built his empire and proven his worth to a world that had written him off as just another foster kid from the streets, Elijah felt truly wealthy, not in the way his bank account measured wealth, but in the way that mattered. As he tucked Keisha into her new bed that night, a real bed with soft sheets and a nightlight that cast stars on the ceiling. She looked up at him with eyes that were learning to hold light instead of shadows. Are you my daddy now? She whispered. If you want me to be. She considered this seriously. I think I do. Then yes, he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I'm your daddy now. Neither of them knew that 3 blocks away, a man sat in a car watching the penthouse through binoculars. Neither of them knew that their peaceful new life had an expiration, date, or that the past Elijah thought he'd buried was about to claw its way back to the surface. But for now, in this moment, they were simply a father and daughter who had found each other against all odds. And that was enough. 6 months had transformed both their lives in ways Elijah never imagined possible. Keisha had gained weight. Her hair now gleamed with health, and she'd started second grade at Seattle's most prestigious private academy. She still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at loud noises, but she laughed now too. Real laughter that filled the penthouse with warmth. Elijah found himself leaving work early just to help with homework or hear about her day. The quarterly reports could wait. Watching Keisha discover the joy in simple things like ice cream or picture books felt more important than any merger or acquisition. Which made Detective Rivera's call on that crisp October morning all the more jarring. Mr. Brown, this is Detective Anna Rivera from Portland PD. We spoke about Keisha's case when you first adopted her. Elijah stepped away from the breakfast table where Keisha was carefully spreading jam on her toast. Of course, Detective. Has Raymond Williams been found? He has. 3 days ago, shot dead in a meth house outside Tacoma, but that's not why I'm calling. Her voice carried an edge that made Elijah's military instincts sharpen. We searched his belongings and found some things you need to know about. What kind of things? The kind that suggest your daughter's father was involved in something much bigger than child abuse. Can you come down to Portland today? Elijah glanced at Keisha, who was watching him with the hyper-awareness that trauma had taught her. She could read his moods like a survival skill. I'll be there this afternoon. After arranging for Marcus to stay with Keisha and Dr. Chen to come by for their regular session, Elijah drove south through the gray morning. Portland PD's headquarters felt familiar in an unwelcome way. Too many military briefings in sterile government buildings had trained him to hate fluorescent lights and the smell of industrial coffee. Detective Rivera looked as tired as her voice had sounded. She led him to an interview room where evidence bags were laid out on a metal table like pieces of a puzzle he didn't want to solve. Raymond Williams wasn't just a drug addict and child abuser, she began without preamble. He was ex-military, discharged 8 years ago from a special operations unit. She slid a folder across the table. Shadow Brigade? Ring any bells? The name hit Elijah like a physical blow. Shadow Brigade, the unit that didn't officially exist. The missions that were classified so deep they'd never see daylight. The brothers he'd served with, bled with, mourned. You've gone pale, Mr. Brown. I take it you recognize the name. Elijah nodded slowly. I served in that unit, but I don't remember anyone named Raymond Williams. Different name back then, Ray Kowalski. Changed it after discharge, along with half the guys from your unit, apparently. Which brings me to this. She held up an evidence bag containing a Polaroid photograph, edges yellowed with age. Elijah, quote, S blood went cold. The photo showed 5 men in combat gear, faces painted with camouflage, somewhere in the mountains of Eastern Europe. He recognized every face, including his own 10 years younger, grinning with the confidence of someone who thought he was invincible. But it was the man on the far left that made his hands shake. Ray Kowalski, stocky build, cruel eyes, the kind of soldier who enjoyed violence a little too much. Elijah remembered him now. How could he have forgotten? There's more, Rivera continued. Williams, Kowalski, had communications with several of the former Shadow Brigade members, names you might recognize: Viktor Kozlov, Danny Chang, Marcus Petrov. Each name was another piece of shrapnel in his chest. Kozlov, their former squad leader, brilliant and ruthless. Chang, explosives expert with steady hands and a gambling problem. Petrov, sniper, could thread a needle at 1,000 yards. All of them supposedly dead, according to the official reports. All of them apparently very much alive. What kind of communications? Elijah managed. The kind that suggests they've been running organized crime operations across the Pacific Northwest, arms dealing, human trafficking, money laundering, using military tactics and government connections to stay ahead of law enforcement. Rivera opened another file. 3 months before you adopted Keisha, Williams contacted someone, we think Kozlov, about a valuable asset he needed to liquidate quickly. Based on the timing, we think he was talking about Keisha. You think he was going to sell his own daughter. We think he was going to sell her to people who'd already paid for her. The cage wasn't just abuse, Mr. Brown. It was storage. She was being held for delivery. Elijah felt something dark and familiar rising in his chest, the cold, calculating rage that had made him effective in the field. Someone had been planning to buy his little girl like merchandise, someone who might still be planning to collect their purchase. There's one more thing. Rivera's voice was gentler now. We found a letter Williams wrote but never sent. It mentions you specifically, says you took what belonged to the organization and that the commander won't let this slide. Kozlov. Most likely. Mr. Brown, I think your adoption of Keisha wasn't the random act of charity the media portrayed. I think you were targeted. I think they wanted you to take her. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. A news story calculated to reach someone like him, a child who matched his own traumatic background perfectly, a rescue that felt too easy, adoption paperwork that moved too smoothly. He quote, "been played," manipulated by people who knew exactly which emotional buttons to push to make him react predictably. They'd used his own compassion as a weapon against him. But as the rage built, another realization hit him. It didn't matter. Even knowing it was a trap. Even understanding he'd been manipulated, he wouldn't change anything. Keisha was his daughter now, not because of some criminal conspiracy, but because they'd chosen each other. Because family was about love and protection, not blood or circumstance. Detective, I need you to understand something. Whatever these people want, whatever their plan is, they made one critical error. Rivera raised an eyebrow. Which is, they gave me something worth fighting for. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We want what's ours. You have 48 hours to arrange a meeting. Come alone or the girl suffers for your selfishness. Elijah showed the message to Rivera, whose face tightened. Mr. Brown, you need to let us handle this. These aren't street criminals. They're trained killers with government training. So am I, Elijah said quietly, standing and collecting the evidence photos. With respect, Detective, your department isn't equipped for what's coming, but I am. Mr. Brown, I'm not going to hand my daughter over to people who put her in a cage. His voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. They want a fight, they're going to get one. As he walked out of the police station into the grey afternoon, Elijah was already planning. He had 48 hours to prepare for war. 48 hours to transform from successful businessman back into the weapon the military had forged him to be. Shadow Brigade thought they were hunting prey. They were about to discover they'd awakened a predator. The drive back to Seattle gave Elijah time to think, to plan, and to make phone calls to people he hadn't contacted in years. The first call was to Colonel James Mitchell, retired, the man who'd recruited him for Shadow Brigade and the closest thing to a father Elijah had ever known. Jimmy Mitchell here. Colonel, it's Elijah Brown. A pause. Well, I'll be damned. Haven't heard from you since you got out of the game. How's civilian life treating you? It's complicated. I need to see you. Tonight, if possible. The tone in Elijah's voice must have communicated urgency because Mitchell's casual demeanor shifted immediately. What kind of complicated are we talking? About Shadow Brigade complicated. Son of a bitch. My cabin in the Cascades. You remember where? I'll meet you there in 3 hours. Elijah remembered. The remote A-frame, where Mitchell had debriefed them after particularly difficult missions, where they'd process things that couldn't be discussed in official channels, where Mitchell had helped him transition out of military life, when the weight of classified operations became too much to bear. Before heading to the mountains, Elijah stopped at home to check on Keisha. Marcus met him at the elevator with a concerned expression. How'd it go in Portland? Worse than we thought. Elijah filled Marcus in on the details as they walked toward the living room where Keisha was curled up with Dr. Chen, working through some therapeutic exercises. Daddy! Keisha jumped up and ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. The simple gesture filled him with fierce protectiveness. "Hey, Princess, how was your session with Dr. Chen?" "Good. We talked about dreams and how sometimes they're just our brains working through things." She looked up at him with eyes that held too much wisdom for 7 years old. "Are you okay? You look worried?" He knelt down to her level, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups have to deal with difficult things from their past. But I want you to know that no matter what happens, you're safe. Marcus and I will make sure of that." Keisha nodded solemnly. "Is someone trying to hurt us?" The directness of the question caught him off guard. Dr. Chen had been working with Keisha on processing trauma, helping her understand that being hypervigilant wasn't always necessary. But right now, that hypervigilance might be a survival skill again. "Some people might try," he said honestly, "but I won't let them succeed." After dinner and bedtime stories, Elijah met with Marcus privately in his office. The military citation on his desk seemed to watch them as they planned. "I need you to contact Thompson and Rodriguez," Elijah said, referring to 2 former Special Forces operators who'd worked with Marcus in Afghanistan. "Bring them up to speed and have them here by tomorrow night." "Copy that." "What about Keisha?" "Dr. Chen is moving into the guest room temporarily. I trust her to keep Keisha calm and help her process whatever's coming." Elijah pulled out his laptop and began typing rapidly. "I'm transferring 5 million to the emergency account. Use whatever you need for equipment and personnel." Marcus nodded, then hesitated. "Boss, these guys we're dealing with, they know how we think. They know our training, our tactics, which works both ways. They might know how I think, but I know how they think too." The drive to Mitchell's cabin took him through increasingly remote terrain, winding mountain roads that eventually turned to gravel. The A-frame sat in a clearing surrounded by towering pines, lights glowing warmly in the windows. Mitchell was waiting on the porch, still imposing at 68, his grey hair military short and his posture ramrod straight. "You look good, son. Success suits you." "Thank you, sir. I wish this was a social call." Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and coffee. Mitchell poured 2 glasses of bourbon and settled into a leather chair across from Elijah. "Talk to me about Shadow Brigade." Elijah laid out everything. The adoption, the discovery of Keisha's father's identity, the photograph, the threats. Mitchell listened without interruption, his face growing darker with each revelation. "Victor Kozlov," Mitchell said finally. "I should have seen this coming." "Sir?" Mitchell walked to an old filing cabinet and pulled out an encrypted hard drive. "After the unit was disbanded, I kept copies of certain files. Call it insurance. The official story was that Kozlov and the others died in that clusterfuck in Montenegro, but I had doubts." He plugged the drive into his laptop, entering a long password. Files began populating the screen. Mission reports, personnel records, classified communications. The Montenegro operation was supposed to be a simple extraction, Mitchell continued. "Get in, grab the arms dealer who was selling to both sides, get out." But somebody leaked the details to the local militia. Half the team was killed in the ambush, Elijah remembered. The muzzle flashes in the dark, the sound of bullets hitting stone, the weight of carrying wounded teammates to the extraction point. You and 4 others made it out, but I always wondered about the intelligence failure. Kozlov was the one who insisted on the route that led straight into the ambush. You think he set us up? I think Victor Kozlov saw an opportunity to disappear with a new identity and a lot of government training. He staged his own death and took several other team members with him. Men who were tired of taking orders, tired of risking their lives for a government that would disavow their existence if things went wrong. Mitchell pulled up a financial analysis. Over the past 8 years, there have been numerous arms deals, trafficking operations, and money laundering schemes across the Pacific Northwest, all bearing the hallmarks of military precision and inside knowledge. Why now? Why target me after all this time? Because you're successful, you're visible. You have resources they want and a reputation they can exploit. Mitchell leaned forward. But more than that, You found their merchandise. Keisha wasn't just being abused by her father. She was being prepared for sale to very specific buyers. I end human trafficking for people with particular appetites. Elijah's jaw clenched. They're going to try to complete the transaction. Exactly. But here's what they didn't count on. You're not the same soldier who left the service 8 years ago. You've got resources now, connections, motivation. You're more dangerous to them as Elijah Brown than you ever were as just another special operator. Mitchell stood and walked to a gun safe, entering the combination. Inside were weapons that definitely weren't civilian legal, along with communications equipment and other gear that had never officially existed. The question is, what are you planning to do about it? Elijah looked at the encrypted files, at the weapons, at the man who taught him everything about staying alive in impossible situations. I'm planning to end this. Permanently. Good. Because that little girl deserves to grow up without looking over her shoulder. Mitchell began pulling equipment from the safe. And Viktor Kozlov deserves to pay for what he did to our brothers in Montenegro. Elijah returned from the mountains at dawn, his mind clearer, but his heart heavier with the weight of what needed to be done. The penthouse felt different now, not like a sanctuary, but like a glass cage where they were visible and vulnerable. Dr. Chen was already in the kitchen making coffee when he arrived, her overnight bag by the door indicating she'd stayed as promised. Keisha's still sleeping, she said quietly. But she had nightmares. She kept calling for you. What kind of nightmares? Men in masks, cages, but also new elements. People watching her, following her. Her subconscious is picking up on the tension, even though she doesn't understand the source. Elijah poured himself coffee, noticing his hands were steadier than they'd been in years. Combat mindset was settling over him like familiar armor. Dr. Chen, I need to ask something difficult. How much does Keisha actually remember about her time in captivity? More than she's told us, I suspect. Trauma memories are complicated, sometimes suppressed, sometimes hyper-detailed. Children often remember things adults miss because they notice different details. She studied his face. Why? Because I think she witnessed more than just abuse. I think she saw things that could be evidence of larger criminal operations. Dr. Chen set down her coffee cup. Elijah, you can't interrogate a traumatized child for intelligence purposes. I'm not talking about interrogation. I'm talking about helping her process memories that might be important for her own safety. Before Dr. Chen could respond, they heard small footsteps on the marble floor. Keisha appeared in the doorway wearing her favorite pajamas, the ones with cartoon bears that Elijah had bought during her second week with him. Daddy? You came back. Of course I came back, Princess. I'll always come back. She ran to him for their morning hug, and he held her close, breathing in the smell of her shampoo and the trust she placed in him. Over her head, he met Dr. Chen's eyes and saw understanding there. After breakfast, while Keisha worked on a jigsaw puzzle in the living room, Dr. Chen approached Elijah with something in her hands, several pieces of paper covered in crayon drawings. She made these yesterday while you were gone, Dr. Chen said softly. I thought you should see them. The first drawing showed a house, not a happy house like the one she'd drawn months ago, but a dark, angular building with bars on the windows. Stick figures stood outside, but their faces were scribbled black dot. The second drawing was more disturbing. It showed a small figure in what looked like a cage, but around the edges were other figures. Adults, talking, pointing, exchanging what looked like money. But it was the third drawing that made Elijah's blood run cold. A man with a scar across his face, standing next to a car. The detail was remarkable for a 7-year-old's artwork. The scar ran from the left temple to the corner of his mouth. Elijah recognized that scar. Viktor Kozlov, souvenir from a roadside bomb in Kosovo. Dr. Chen, he said carefully, has Keisha ever mentioned having an unusually good memory? Actually, yes. Her recall for visual details is extraordinary. It's not uncommon in children who've experienced trauma. hypervigilance can create almost photographic memory as a survival mechanism. Elijah knelt down next to Keisha at the puzzle table. "Princess, these drawings you made, they're very detailed. Can you tell me about this man?" He showed her the drawing of Kozlov. Keisha looked at the paper, then at him, her expression serious. "The scary man. He came to see my real daddy lots of times. He talked about me like I wasn't there." "What did he say?" "That I was premium merchandise. And the buyers were getting impatient. That my daddy better get me ready soon, or there would be consequences." She continued working on the puzzle, fitting pieces together with methodical precision. "I didn't understand what merchandise meant then, but Dr. Chen explained that some bad people think children are things to be sold instead of loved." Dr. Chen's face had gone pale. "Keisha, sweetheart, you never told me you remembered specific conversations. You asked about feelings and scary things. This was just talking, but it was scary too because they always looked at me after, like they were deciding something." Elijah felt pieces of the larger puzzle clicking into place in his own mind. "Princess, did you ever hear them mention names? Other people they worked with?" Keisha nodded, still focused on her puzzle. "Victor, that's the scary man. And someone called Chang, who was supposed to handle transport logistics. And there was a lady named Elena, who was very angry because her clients were threatening to find other suppliers." The clinical way she recited these details was heartbreaking. A 7-year-old should be talking about dolls and cartoons, not human trafficking operations. "Keisha," Dr. Chen said gently, "you have an amazing memory. But sometimes when we remember scary things too clearly, it can give us bad dreams." "No, but Daddy says sometimes we have to remember difficult things so we can stay safe." Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression tense. "Boss, we need to talk, now." Elijah kissed Keisha's forehead. "Keep working on that puzzle, Princess. I'll be right back." In the office, Marcus had surveillance footage pulled up on multiple screens. "We've got company, 3 teams, rotating surveillance pattern, professional setup." "How long?" "Started this morning around 6. They're good. I almost missed them, but they're using the same counter-surveillance techniques we learned in the military." Elijah studied the screens, recognizing the disciplined movements of trained operatives. "Time to move to the estate. Already contacted Thompson and Rodriguez. They'll meet us there with full tactical packages." "What about the cover story for Keisha? Working vacation. Dr. Chen's coming as part of her ongoing treatment program. Extended stay in the mountains for therapeutic purposes." Elijah nodded. The estate in the Cascade Mountains had been his first major purchase after Brown Tech went public. Officially, it was a retreat center for corporate planning sessions. Unofficially, it was a fortress. Remote location, advanced security systems, defensible position. He'd designed it with his military background in mind, never imagining he'd need to use those features to protect his daughter. An hour later, they were in the armored SUV heading east toward the mountains. Keisha sat between Dr. Chen and Elijah, chattering about the scenery and asking questions about wildlife. To anyone watching, they looked like a family heading out for a weekend getaway. But in the rearview mirror, Elijah could see the black sedan, maintaining perfect follow distance, just close enough to keep visual contact, just far enough back to avoid detection by civilian drivers. "Daddy," Keisha said suddenly, "are the bad men following us?" He met her eyes, seeing the same hyper-awareness that had kept her alive in captivity. "Yes, Princess, but we're going somewhere they can't hurt you." "Good," she said simply, then returned to looking out the window. "I like being safe with you." As they climbed into the mountains, leaving the city behind, Elijah felt the familiar calm that came before combat. The hunt was beginning, but this time he wasn't hunting for a government that might disavow his existence. This time, he was protecting his family. The estate sat on 40 acres of forested mountainside, accessible only by a single winding road that could be easily monitored and defended. The main house was built into the slope like a fortress, with reinforced concrete walls disguised as rustic timber and stone. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided panoramic views, while bulletproof glass kept the occupants safe. As their SUV approached the security gate, Elijah watched Keisha's face light up at the sight of the towering pines and the mountain lake visible. In the distance, "It's like a castle," she breathed, pressing her face to the window. "That's exactly what it is, Princess. Our castle." Marcus performed a security sweep, while Dr. Chen helped Keisha settle into one of the guest rooms. The child-friendly space had been hastily prepared with books, toys, and art supplies, but it also had reinforced walls and a panic room behind a hidden door, just in case. That evening, after Keisha was asleep and Dr. Chen was reading in the main room, Elijah descended to the estate's basement. Few people knew this level existed. It housed his personal armory, communications center, and what he privately called his memory room, a space where he kept reminders of his military service. Marcus found him there an hour later, sitting in front of a display case that held items most people would consider morbid. Dog tags belonging to fallen teammates, each pair telling the story of a brother lost in service to missions that officially never happened. The centerpiece of the collection was a set stained with blood, the tags belonging to Staff Sergeant David Reaper Martinez, Elijah's best friend, and the closest thing to a brother he'd ever had. "Haven't seen you down here in years," Marcus said quietly. "Haven't had reason to remember this stuff in years." Elijah lifted the blood-stained tags, feeling their weight, but now it all matters again. He walked to a secure laptop and began pulling up the classified files Mitchell had shared. Montenegro, 8 years ago. "You remember the briefing?" "Like it was yesterday." Extract Dmitry Volkov, arms dealer selling to both NATO and Russian-backed separatists. Intelligence said he was ready to defect with information about weapon supply routes. Intelligence was wrong. Elijah pulled up a satellite photo of the extraction site, a mountain compound that should have been lightly defended. Or it was deliberately falsified. The mission had started perfectly. Shadow Brigade inserted at night approached the compound using established infiltration protocols. David had been point man, his instincts for danger legendary throughout special operations. But the compound wasn't lightly defended. It was a killing ground, prepared specifically for them. Viktor Kozlov insisted on the approach route, Elijah continued, bringing up tactical maps. Said his reconnaissance showed minimal security on the eastern approach, but the recon was 3 days old, and he'd been in contact with local assets we didn't know about. Marcus studied the files. "You think he was already working with Volkov's people?" "I think Victor saw an opportunity to disappear with a new identity and substantial funding. The mission was cover for him to fake his death and eliminate witnesses who might ask uncomfortable questions later. The ambush had been perfectly orchestrated. Shadow Brigade walked into crossfire from elevated positions, exactly the kind of trap that would maximize casualties. David had taken point-blank fire, trying to cover Elijah's movement to better cover. "I carried David out of there," Elijah said, his voice tight with old grief. "He died in my arms at the extraction point. Last thing he said was that Kozlov had been acting strange, making private communications. And you never reported the suspicions." "To who?" "Kozlov was officially dead. The mission was classified beyond any normal reporting structure. And I was dealing with survivor's guilt and trying to transition to civilian life." Elijah set the dog tags back in their place. "But I should have known Victor would surface eventually. Men like that don't stay dead." His secure phone buzzed, with an incoming message from an encrypted number. "Beautiful estate, Brown. Isolated. Perfect for a family reunion. We'll be in touch about arrangements." They'd been found, just as Elijah had expected. But being expected didn't make the threat less real. "Marcus, activate all perimeter defenses. Contact Thompson and Rodriguez. I want them here within 4 hours with full tactical loadout." "Copy that. What about Dr. Chen and Keisha?" "They stay in the secure area until this is over. Dr. Chen understands the stakes now." Upstairs, Keisha was having another nightmare. Dr. Chen had awakened Elijah with her soft knock, explaining that the child was experiencing what appeared to be recovered memories rather than simple anxiety dreams. She keeps talking about the meeting in the warehouse, Dr. Chen whispered as they stood outside Keisha's room. She's describing specific details, license plates, faces, conversations about money transfers. Her photographic memory is processing trauma chronologically. Elijah realized being in a safe environment is allowing her brain to sort through suppressed experiences. "Daddy?" Keisha's small voice called from inside the room. He found her sitting up in bed, clutching the teddy bear he'd given her that first day in the hospital. Her eyes were alert, but troubled. "I remembered something," she said, "about the scary man and my real daddy. They had a big meeting in a place with lots of cars and loud noises. The scary man was very angry. What was he angry about? My real daddy took money that wasn't his, and he took me when he was supposed to give me to someone else. The scary man said there would be consequences." Dr. Chen sat on the edge of the bed. "Keisha, these memories might be difficult, but they're also helping your brain heal by processing what happened. I know. But I also remember the scary man talking about finding you, Daddy. He said you were the bleeding heart millionaire, and that they could use that against you. The clinical accuracy of a 7-year-old recounting criminal conspiracy planning was both impressive and heartbreaking. But it also confirmed what Elijah had suspected. This whole situation had been orchestrated from the beginning. Princess, I want you to know that whatever these bad people planned, they made one mistake. They gave me the most important thing in the world to protect me, you, and I'm very good at protecting important things." After Keisha fell back asleep, Elijah and Dr. Chen sat in the kitchen while Marcus coordinated with his incoming tactical team. The psychologist looked exhausted but determined. "This child has survived things that would break most adults," she said quietly. "But she's not just surviving. She's processing, adapting, healing. Her resilience is remarkable. She gets that." "From her real father," Elijah said without thinking, then caught himself. "I mean, you are her real father, Elijah. Biology doesn't create family. Love and protection do. And right now, she needs both." Outside, motion sensors activated as Thompson and Rodriguez arrived with enough firepower to outfit a small army. The castle was becoming a fortress in truth, manned by soldiers who understood exactly what they were defending. But as Elijah checked the perimeter monitors one last time before trying to get some rest, he knew that all the weapons and tactics in the world meant nothing if he couldn't protect the trust of a 7-year-old girl who'd finally learned what it meant to feel safe. Thompson and Rodriguez proved to be exactly what Elijah needed. Professional, experienced, and completely comfortable with the moral ambiguity of their situation. Both men were in their late 30s, veterans of multiple deployments, who'd transitioned to private security work when the regular military couldn't provide enough action or adequate compensation. "Perimeters locked down tight," Thompson reported during their morning briefing. He was a compact man with prematurely gray hair and the kind of alert stillness that marked elite operators. Motion sensors, thermal imaging, and overlapping fields of fire. Anyone approaches this place uninvited will know about it long before they get close. Rodriguez, taller and darker, specialized in communications and electronic warfare. "I've also set up signal interception equipment. If our friends are coordinating their approach, we'll hear about it." As if summoned by his words, Rodriguez's equipment began chirping with an intercept alert. He quickly triangulated the signal and began recording. "Satellite phone," he said, putting the transmission on speaker. "Military-grade encryption, but I can break it." The voices that emerged from the static were speaking in code, but Elijah recognized the rhythm and terminology of tactical communication. More importantly, he recognized Viktor Kozlov's voice, even after 8 years. "Package is secure in mountain facility," Kozlov was saying. "Target has predictably moved to defensive position. Recommend we proceed with phase 2. Another voice. Unfamiliar. What about the girl? Client is getting impatient. The girl is leverage. Once we have Brown neutralized, she becomes a bonus asset for the highest bidder. Elijah's jaw clenched. Even over encrypted communications, they spoke about Keisha like merchandise. Timeline for phase 2? The unknown voice asked. 48 hours. I'm bringing the full team. Chang, Petrov, the new recruits. This ends where it started, with Shadow Brigade methods. The transmission cut out, leaving the room in tense silence. Boss, Marcus said quietly. That sounded like a full tactical assault, Elijah finished. Victor's done playing games. Rodriguez was already working on signal analysis. I can track their communications, maybe get advance warning of their movements, but if they're using rotating frequencies and burst transmissions, do what you can, Elijah said. Every minute of advance warning could save lives. That afternoon, while Keisha worked on schoolwork with Dr. Chen in the secure area, Elijah found himself studying intelligence reports that painted a disturbing picture of his former teammates' activities. Danny Chang had been running weapons through ports from Vancouver to San Diego, using his explosives expertise to intimidate competitors and eliminate obstacles. Marcus Petrov had established himself as the Pacific Northwest's most reliable assassin for hire, his sniper skills making him nearly impossible to catch. But it was Viktor Kozlov who'd built the organization into something approaching a military unit. He'd recruited other dishonorably discharged special operations personnel, created a command structure, and established revenue streams that included not just arms dealing, but human trafficking, drug distribution, and cyber warfare. They're not just criminals, Thompson observed, reading over Elijah's shoulder. They're running a shadow military organization using government training and connections. Question is, Rodriguez added, how many people in official positions are helping them? They've stayed ahead of law enforcement for 8 years. That doesn't happen without inside information. The answer came that evening when Detective Rivera called Elijah's secure line. Mr. Brown, I thought you should know, my investigation into Raymond Williams has been officially terminated. Orders came from federal level. Someone very high up wants this case closed and forgotten. What does that mean for Keisha's safety? It means you're on your own. Whatever protection you can provide, whatever resources you can bring to bear, that's all you've got. The system has been compromised. After Rivera hung up, Elijah called. Colonel Mitchell on his secure line. Jimmy, I need to know how deep this corruption goes. If federal agencies are protecting Kozlov's operation, it's worse than that, Mitchell interrupted. I made some calls after our meeting. Victor isn't just protected, he's being used. Certain elements within the intelligence community find his organization useful for off-books operations. Plausible deniability. Exactly. They can't officially sanction certain actions, but if a rogue special operations unit happens to eliminate inconvenient targets or retrieve sensitive materials, well, that's just criminal activity that happened to serve national interests. Elijah felt the full scope of the conspiracy settling over him like a weight. So not only am I fighting Victor's people, I'm potentially fighting elements of my own government. Son, you need to understand something. The people protecting Victor don't care about you or your daughter. If eliminating both of you serves their interests, they'll call it acceptable losses. That night, Keisha had her most detailed nightmare yet. Dr. Chen woke Elijah at 3 in the morning, explaining that the child had been talking in her sleep, reciting what sounded like a count, numbers and banking information. She's processing financial conversations she overheard, Dr. Chen explained, as they listened at Keisha's door. Her photographic memory is organizing data she didn't understand at the time, but retained perfectly. Keisha was mumbling a sequence of numbers and letters, routing codes, account identifiers, amounts that made Elijah's eyes widen. Millions of dollars flowing through offshore accounts, payment schedules for human trafficking operations, and what sounded like a client list. for extremely wealthy individuals with disturbing appetites. She's a walking database, Elijah realized. Everything Victor's organization has done, every transaction, every client, it's all stored in her memory, which explains why they want her back so desperately, Dr. Chen said. She's not just evidence, she's the key to their entire financial network. The next morning, Rodriguez intercepted another transmission that changed everything. They're not just planning an assault, he reported grimly. They're planning to make it look like a tragic accident. Murder-suicide scenario. Grief-stricken adoptive father kills daughter and himself rather than face investigation into his criminal past. Thompson looked up from cleaning his rifle. They're going to frame the boss posthumously? Apparently. Victor's handlers want a clean narrative. Dead heroes can't contradict official stories. Elijah felt something cold and familiar settling into his bones, the emotional detachment that had made him effective in the field. Then we make sure the only people dying are the ones who deserve it. Boss, Marcus said carefully, if government assets are backing Victor's play, we could be looking at serious federal response. Drones, tactical teams, the full alphabet soup. Then we better make sure we end this before they can mobilize. Elijah stood and walked to the weapons locker, beginning to select gear with the methodical precision of a master craftsman choosing tools. Victor thinks he's hunting prey. Time to remind him what happens when you corner a predator. As evening approached, motion sensors began detecting movement in the forest surrounding the estate. The siege was beginning. Dr. Chen's request had seemed routine at the time. Additional medical tests to ensure Keisha's recovery from malnutrition was progressing properly. Blood work, vitamin levels, genetic screening for any hereditary conditions that might affect her long-term health. Standard procedure for a child who'd suffered prolonged abuse and neglect. I need to speak with you privately, Dr. Chen said, her voice carrying an edge Elijah had never heard before. It was late afternoon, and they'd been monitoring enemy positions all day through the estate's advanced surveillance system. Victor's people were out there in the forest, watching, waiting, planning their assault. But something in Dr. Chen's tone made Elijah set down the tactical radio and follow her to his private office. She closed the door behind them and placed a manila envelope on his desk with hands that weren't quite steady. The medical tests came back this morning. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you this. Elijah opened the envelope, expecting to see routine blood work results. Instead, he found himself staring at a genetic analysis report from one of Seattle's most respected medical laboratories. The technical terminology filled most of the page, but one section had been highlighted in yellow. Probability of familial relationship, 99.97%. Classification, uncle-niece. The words didn't process immediately. Elijah read the line again, then looked up at Dr. Chen's troubled face. There has to be a mistake, he said quietly. I thought so too. I ran the test twice, through 2 different labs. The results are identical. Dr. Chen sat down across from him, her professional composure cracking slightly. Elijah, Keisha is your brother's daughter. I don't have a brother. You had a brother. Staff Sergeant Marcus Brown, killed in action in Afghanistan 7 years ago. The name hit Elijah like a physical blow. Marcus Brown. Not the Marcus who worked for him now, but his younger brother, the one who'd followed him into military service despite Elijah's attempts to talk him out of it. The brother who died in an IED explosion while Elijah was halfway around the world on a classified mission. That's impossible, Elijah said, but even as he spoke, he was remembering things. Marcus had mentioned a girlfriend before his final deployment, someone he'd met during leave in Portland. A nurse named Jennifer who worked at a children's hospital. Marcus had been serious about her, talking about getting married after his tour ended. I pulled Marcus's service record, Dr. Chen continued gently. He was on leave in Portland 8 years ago, exactly 9 months before Keisha was born. The timing matches perfectly. But her name, Keisha Williams. Her father was Raymond Williams. Her mother was Jennifer Martinez. She died in a car accident when Keisha was 3. Jennifer. Never told your brother she was pregnant. He deployed before she found out, and he was killed before she could contact him. Dr. Chen pulled out additional documents. Raymond Williams was Jennifer's boyfriend after Marcus died. He adopted Keisha legally, but he was never her biological father. Elijah stared at the test results, his mind reeling. Every assumption about their connection, every moment of inexplicable bonding suddenly made sense. The instant protective instinct he'd felt watching the news report. The way Keisha had trusted him despite her trauma. The resemblance he'd noticed but dismissed. The shape of her eyes, the stubborn set of her jaw when she was determined about something. "Does she know?" he asked. "Not yet. I wanted to discuss with you how to handle this revelation. For a child who's already processing significant trauma, learning about her true parentage could be overwhelming. Or it could be healing." Elijah looked at the genetic report again, seeing not just scientific data, but validation of the bond he'd felt with Keisha from the beginning. "She's not just my adopted daughter. She's family, real family. There's more," Dr. Chen said reluctantly. "I think Victor Kozlov knows." "What do you mean?" "The timing of everything. Your brother's death. Keisha ending up with an abusive adoptive father who happened to be connected to your old unit. The news story that reached you at exactly the right moment. It's too coordinated to be coincidence." The implications crashed over Elijah like an avalanche. Victor orchestrated this, the whole thing. "I think he's been planning this for years. Your brother's death created an opportunity, a vulnerable child connected to you by blood but unknown to you personally. The perfect leverage." Elijah stood and began pacing, military training kicking in as he analyzed the tactical situation. With new information, Victor knew that if I ever learned about Keisha's existence, I'd move heaven and earth to protect her. He used my own family bonds as a weapon against me. But how could he have known about the genetic connection if you didn't? Because Marcus told someone. Before he died, he probably wrote to Victor or one of the other Shadow Brigade members about Jennifer, about planning to propose when he got back from deployment. Elijah felt the rage building, cold and calculating. Victor had access to all our personal information, all our emotional vulnerabilities. He filed that information away and waited for the right moment to use it. Dr. Chen watched him with concern. "Elijah, this revelation doesn't change what you need to do to protect Keisha, but it might change how you approach the situation." "You're right. It changes everything." Elijah walked to his desk and pulled out his secure phone. "Victor thinks he's been manipulating my emotions, using my compassion against me. He doesn't realize he's been threatening my actual family." As he scrolled through his contacts, looking for Colonel Mitchell's number, a small voice interrupted from the doorway. "Daddy, why do you look sad?" Keisha stood in the entrance to the office, still wearing the clothes she'd used for art therapy with Dr. Chen earlier. Her face showed the hyper-awareness that trauma had taught her. She could read adult emotions like a survival manual. Elijah knelt down to her level, looking into eyes that he now realized were shaped exactly like his brother's. "Princess, Dr. Chen and I were talking about your family history, about where you came from before I adopted you, about my real daddy who hurt me." "No, sweetheart. About your real daddy who loved you very much but died before he could meet you." Keisha's expression grew serious. "I had another daddy?" Dr. Chen joined them on the floor. "Keisha, the man who hurt you wasn't your biological father. Your real father was a soldier, like Elijah used to be. He was killed in a war before you were born. Was he good?" Elijah felt his throat tighten. "He was the best man I ever knew. He was brave and kind and funny, and he would have loved you more than anything in the world." "How do you know?" "Because he was my brother." Keisha processed this information with the careful deliberation of a child who'd learned to think through complex situations. "So you're not just my adopted daddy. You're my real family?" "Yes, Princess, you're my real family too." She considered this for a long moment, then nodded with satisfaction. Good. I was hoping we were really related. It felt like we were. The simple acceptance of a 7-year-old cut through all the complex emotions Elijah had been wrestling with. Family wasn't about genetics or legal documents. It was about love and protection and choosing each other every day. But knowing they were blood relations added a layer of connection that felt like coming home. "Daddy," Keisha said, settling into his lap with the easy trust that still amazed him. "Are the bad men trying to hurt me because of my real daddy?" The question showed an understanding that was both impressive and heartbreaking. "Yes, Princess, but they made a mistake. They thought I would protect you just because I'm a good person. They didn't know I would protect you because you're my family." "What's the difference?" Elijah looked at Dr. Chen, then back at his niece, his daughter in every way that mattered. Good people try to do the right thing. Family does whatever it takes. Outside, motion sensors activated as Victor's assault team moved into final positions. The siege was about to begin, but now it wasn't just about protecting an adopted child from criminals. Now it was about a blood debt that had been 8 years. In the making, the revelation about Keisha's true parentage had shifted something fundamental in Elijah's approach to the coming battle. This was no longer about protecting an innocent child from criminals. This was about avenging his brother and protecting his blood family from people who'd manipulated them both from beyond the grave. As darkness fell over the mountain estate, Elijah spread tactical maps across his office desk, marking known and suspected enemy positions with the methodical precision of a master strategist. The estate's advanced surveillance system showed heat signatures moving through the forest. At least 12 hostiles in coordinated teams approaching from multiple directions. "Victor's using classic special operations doctrine," Marcus observed. "Studying the enemy positions. 3-axis approach, overlapping fields of fire, extraction routes pre-planned." "Which means he's also following predictable patterns," Elijah replied, adding notes to his battle plan. "Thompson, what's our ammunition status?" "Enough to fight a small war," Thompson reported. "Rodriguez has confirmed Victor's communications. Frequency. We'll have advance warning of their tactical adjustments, and Dr. Chen has Keisha secured in the bunker level with direct communication to our command post." Elijah looked up from his maps. "Gentlemen, I need you to understand something. The child in that bunker isn't just my adopted daughter. She's my brother's child, my actual blood family." The 3 men exchanged glances. In military culture, the distinction was significant. Protecting innocence was a duty. Protecting family was personal. "Changes the rules of engagement," Rodriguez said quietly. "Completely." Elijah agreed. "Victor Kozlov orchestrated my brother's death and has spent years manipulating my family. This ends tonight. Permanently." He walked to a secure cabinet and withdrew a detailed architectural drawing, the estate's classified defense systems that had never appeared on any official blueprint. Hidden weapons caches, reinforced firing positions, underground tunnels connecting different sections of the property. "The public records show a luxury retreat center," Elijah explained. "The reality is a fortress designed by someone who spent 8 years learning how to kill people in impossible situations." The main house sat on elevated ground with commanding views in all directions. The approach routes Victor's teams were using had been anticipated during the original construction. Every tree, every boulder, every apparent piece of natural cover had been incorporated into fields of fire for the estate's defenders. "Phase 1, Elijah continued, pointing to the tactical map. "They'll probe our perimeter defenses, looking for weak points and gauging our response capabilities. Victor's too smart to commit his full force without understanding what he's facing." "How do we respond to the probes?" Marcus asked. "We let them think they're succeeding. Give them false confidence while gathering intelligence on their equipment." "And tactical approach." Elijah marked several positions on the map. "Thompson, you'll take Overwatch position in the North Tower. Best sight lines, protected approach, secondary escape route if you're compromised." Thompson nodded. already familiar with the position from their earlier reconnaissance. Rodriguez, you'll coordinate from the communications center, monitor their frequencies, track their movements, and coordinate our response timing. Copy that. Marcus, you're with me on mobile defense. We'll use the underground tunnel system to reposition between engagements, hit them from unexpected angles. Elijah's secure phone buzzed with an incoming call from Colonel Mitchell. Son, I'm 15 minutes out. With 3 additional operators. Former Delta Force, all solid. Negative, Colonel. Appreciate the offer, but this needs to stay small and mobile. Besides, if government assets are backing Victor's play, bringing in more military personnel could complicate things legally. Understood. But Elijah, I'm monitoring federal communications channels. There's significant chatter about your location. Whatever you're planning, you need to move fast. After Mitchell hung up, Elijah gathered his team for final preparations. The weapons he selected were tools he'd hoped never to use again. Suppressed. Rifles for precision work, close quarters, battle equipment for indoor fighting, and explosives for area denial. But it was the combat knife he strapped to his vest that carried the most meaning. The same knife he'd carried through 8 years of classified operations, the one that had been in his hands when he held his brother Marcus during his final moments in that field hospital in Afghanistan. Boss, Rodriguez called from the communications station, intercepting final coordination signals. Victor's teams are moving to assault positions. Through the estate's night vision cameras, they could see the attack force spreading out in perfect tactical formation. Professionals with military-grade equipment moving with the discipline of elite operators. There, Marcus pointed to a thermal, signature larger than the others. Command position, Eastern Ridge. That has to be Victor. Elijah studied the screen, seeing the man who'd betrayed his unit and orchestrated years of manipulation. End game is capture, not elimination. I want him alive for questioning. And if he won't surrender, then we adapt. 2 floors below, Doctor. Chen sat with Keisha in the secure bunker, reading stories and playing quiet games to keep the child calm. The bunker was more like a comfortable apartment, fully stocked with food, water, entertainment, and communication equipment. But the reinforced walls and armored door left no doubt about its true purpose. Dr. Chen, Keisha said during a pause in their reading, Daddy's going to fight the bad men, isn't he? He's going to protect us, sweetheart. That's what daddies do. My first daddy, my blood daddy, was he good at fighting bad men? Dr. Chen chose her words carefully. Your father, Marcus, was very brave. He protected people who couldn't protect themselves, like me and Daddy Elijah do for each other. Exactly like that. Above them, motion sensors triggered the first alert. Victor's assault teams had begun their advance. Elijah watched the tactical display from the command post, seeing enemy positions updating in real time. The attack was perfectly coordinated, simultaneous pressure from 3 directions, diversionary actions to split defensive attention, backup teams positioned to exploit any breakthrough. Just like Montenegro, he murmured, recognizing Victor's tactical signature. Same approach patterns, same timing. Except this time we're ready for it, Marcus replied. Thompson, quote, S voice crackled through the communication system. North team advancing on the main house. 6 hostiles, suppressed weapons moving in tactical formation. Rodriguez, confirm their communications protocol. Standard military hand signals, short-range radio for coordination. They're maintaining comm discipline, which means Victor's worried about interception. Elijah smiled grimly. Good. Fear makes people make mistakes. The first gunshot echoed across the mountain valley as Thompson engaged the northern assault team. The battle for the estate had begun, but this was more than a tactical engagement. This was a reckoning 8 years in the making, between brothers in arms who'd chosen different paths, between the man who'd tried to build something honorable with his life and the man who'd chosen to destroy lives for profit. As Elijah moved through the underground tunnels toward his first engagement position, He carried with him the weight of his brother's memory, the fierce love he felt for his newfound niece, and the cold determination of a man who'd finally found something worth killing for Dot. The siege of the mountain estate would determine not just who survived the night, but who had the moral right to shape Keisha's future. Victor Kozlov was about to learn the difference between fighting for money and fighting for family. The first assault came at 11:47 p.m., coordinated with military precision. Across 3 approaches simultaneously, Elijah watched through thermal imaging as Victor's teams moved like ghosts through the forest, their disciplined advance revealing years of combat experience. Thompson, quote, "S voice came through the comm system, calm and professional. North team breaching. Outer perimeter, 6 hostiles advancing on the main house, standard tactical formation. Copy that. Rodriguez, what's their communication status? Maintaining radio silence except for essential coordination. They're expecting surveillance interception." Elijah gripped his combat knife, the same 7-inch blade he'd carried through classified missions across 3 continents. The weight of it felt familiar in his hand, like returning to a language he'd tried to forget. This knife had saved his life in Mogadishu, had cut through enemy restraints in Kosovo, and had been the last thing his brother Marcus had touched before the medics took over in that field hospital. "Remember," Elijah said into his throat mic, "we need intelligence on their full operation. Wounded and captured provide more value than dead." "Unless they don't give us a choice," Marcus replied from his position in the Eastern Tunnel Network. The first exchange of gunfire echoed across the mountain valley as Thompson engaged the Northern assault team. Muzzle flashes lit up the forest like deadly fireflies, the sound of suppressed rifles creating sharp cracks that rolled across the landscape. "Contact north," Thompson reported. 2 hostiles down, 4 repositioning to flanking positions. "These guys know what they're doing." Rodriguez's station lit up with intercepted communications. "They're calling for support from the Eastern team. Victor's adjusting tactics in real time." Through the estate's night vision system, Elijah could see the assault unfolding like a deadly chess match. Victor's people were good. They moved with the fluid coordination of elite operators, adapted quickly to defensive fire, and maintained tactical discipline under pressure. But they were fighting on ground that Elijah had designed specifically for this kind of engagement. "Marcus, take Tunnel 7 to position Delta. Hit them from behind while they're focused on Thompson's position." "Copy that. Moving now." Elijah activated the estate's defensive systems, automated lighting that strobed to disrupt enemy night vision, acoustic countermeasures that interfered with radio communications, and concealed barriers that funneled attacking forces into predetermined kill zones. The Northern team found themselves caught between Thompson's accurate fire from above and Marcus's flanking attack from concealed positions. Military training met superior tactical planning, and Victor's people began taking casualties. 2 more down on the north approach, Thompson reported, remaining hostiles withdrawing to regroup. But the northern assault had been a probing attack. The real threat came from the east, where Victor himself was leading a larger force directly toward the main house. Rodriguez, quote, "S voice carried new urgency. Eastern team, moving fast. 8 hostiles, heavy weapons, advancing on the primary structure. Boss, they've got explosives." Elijah moved through the underground tunnels with practiced stealth, emerging behind defensive positions that gave him clear sightlines on the approaching team. Through his rifle scope, he could see Victor Kozlov for the first time in 8 years. The man looked older, harder, with new scars marking his face, and the kind of dead eyes that came from too many years of violence for profit. But his tactical movements remained precise, professional, deadly. "Victor," Elijah whispered into his throat mic, knowing his former teammate would be monitoring all frequencies. A pause in the enemy advance. Then Victor's voice, distorted by encryption but unmistakably familiar. "Hello, Elijah. Took you long." Enough to join the party. Let's discuss terms. Call off your people, and we can settle this between professionals. Terms? Victor's laugh was cold. You stole my merchandise and killed my operation. The only terms involve you and the girl paying for what you've cost me. The girl is my family, Victor. My brother's daughter. Did you know that when you orchestrated this whole setup? Another pause, longer this time. Marcus never mentioned having a brother. Because he was protecting me from people exactly like you. The emotional revelation created a momentary tactical opportunity. Victor's team had stopped their advance, grouped too closely together while their leader processed unexpected information. Elijah took the shot. His rifle spoke once, the suppressed muzzle flash barely visible in the darkness. One of Victor's flanking guards dropped instantly, the precision of the shot sending the rest of the team scrambling for cover. That's for Marcus, Elijah said into the comm channel. Thompson, Rodriguez, all teams converge on eastern positions. Time to end this. The estate's defensive systems activated in sequence. Floodlights blazing to life, audio countermeasures creating chaos in enemy communications, and automated defense positions engaging targets with mathematical precision. Victor, quote, S perfectly. A planned assault had become a killing ground, his elite operators trapped between converging fields of fire from defenders who knew every inch of the terrain. But as Elijah moved to close the tactical trap, Victor's voice crackled through the communications. One more time. You want to save the girl? Meet me in the main house. Just you and me like old times. The personal challenge hung in the mountain air like a death sentence, and Elijah knew there was only one way this could end. Elijah checked his father's watch, a simple Timex that had survived 2 wars and 30 years of honest work before being passed down to a son who'd never known his father's name. The luminous dial showed 12:23 a.m. In the bunker below, Keisha would be sleeping, trusting that her daddy would keep her safe. The watch had been his talisman through 8 years of classified operations, a reminder that some things were worth protecting across generations. Tonight, it represented everything he fought for: family legacy, protective love, and the responsibility that came with being the last line of defense for someone who couldn't defend themselves. Marcus Thompson Rodriguez, he said into his throat mic, maintain perimeter security, but do not engage unless directly threatened. This ends between Victor and me. Boss, that's not tactically sound, Marcus protested. We have him contained. Multiple angles of attack. Negative. Victor knows if his people are eliminated, he's got nothing left to bargain with. But if I give him what he wants, a personal confrontation, he'll reveal his full hand. The main house was eerily quiet as Elijah entered through the kitchen service door, his combat knife secured but ready, sidearm loaded and holstered. The estate's internal lighting had been dimmed to emergency levels, creating pools of shadow and illumination that could conceal threats or provide tactical advantages. Victor was waiting in the main living room, silhouetted against the massive windows that overlooked the valley. He'd shed his tactical gear in favor of simple black clothing, but Elijah could see the outline of weapons concealed beneath the casual facade. You always were too sentimental, Victor said without turning around. That's what made you predictable in the field, and it's what made this whole operation possible. You manipulated my brother's death and traumatized a 7-year-old child. That's not sentimentality, that's justice. Victor turned, and Elijah saw the full extent of what 8 years as a criminal had done to his former teammate. The man who'd once been disciplined, professional, even principled in his own twisted way, had become something harder and more ruthless. Justice? Victor laughed. Your brother died because he was careless. The girl suffered because her father was greedy. You're here because you can't let go of the past. I'm here because family protects family. Family! Victor spat the word like a curse. You know what your precious family got me? 8 years of hiding, building new identities, creating revenue. Streams from nothing. all because Marcus Brown couldn't follow orders and stay dead quietly. The taunt was designed to provoke an emotional response, to make Elijah react tactically instead of thinking strategically. But 8 years of business negotiations had taught him patience and self-control in ways that military training never. "Tell me about the Montenegro mission," Elijah said calmly. "Tell me how you arranged for half our unit to walk into that ambush." Victor's smile was cold and satisfied. "Dmitry Volkov offered me something the government never could. True financial independence. All I had to do was ensure his extraction never happened and eliminate the witnesses who might ask uncomfortable questions later. David Martinez, Tommy Chen, Jake Morrison, good men with families. Dead men with no future, unlike us survivors who were smart enough to see opportunity in chaos." Elijah felt his father's watch ticking against his wrist, marking seconds that brought him closer to the moment when words would give way to action. "And my brother? How did Marcus threaten your operation?" "Your brother was investigating discrepancies in unit financial records. He'd figured out that several dead operators were still active, still drawing government resources through identity fraud. He was going to expose everything." The admission hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Victor had essentially confessed to multiple murders, conspiracy and treason, but confessions only mattered if someone survived to repeat them. "The girl was always meant to be leverage against you," Victor continued. "Her father owed us money and merchandise. When he tried to run, we used the debt to our advantage. Your brother's death was business. Your involvement was personal insurance. My involvement was your mistake." The fight began without warning or preamble. Victor moved with the lethal speed of elite training, drawing a concealed knife as he closed. The distance between them. But Elijah had been expecting the attack, had been reading Victor's body language and micro-expressions throughout their conversation. The clash was brutal and immediate. Two masters of close quarters combat, each intimately familiar with the other's techniques and weaknesses. Victor was faster, more aggressive, driven by years of criminal violence, but Elijah fought with the focused intensity of a man protecting his family. They moved through the living room like deadly dancers, overturning furniture, shattering glass, each seeking the tactical advantage that would end the confrontation. Victor's knife work was precise and ruthless, designed to disable and intimidate. Elijah's responses were methodical and patient, calculated to create opportunities rather than simply survive attacks. The end came suddenly. Victor overextended on what should have been a killing thrust, leaving himself momentarily vulnerable. Elijah's counterattack was swift and final. His combat knife finding the gap between Victor's ribs with surgical precision. Victor Kozlov dropped to his knees, looking up at his former teammate with something approaching respect. "Always were the better soldier." "No," Elijah replied quietly, "just the better man." As Victor's breathing grew shallow, Elijah heard footsteps in the hallway. His team was securing the area, eliminating the remaining threats, ensuring that the estate was truly safe. The generational watch on his wrist had stopped ticking, its face cracked from the violence of the confrontation. But its purpose had been served. Time had run out for the people who threatened his family. 6 months after the siege at the mountain estate, Seattle's morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Elijah's penthouse office, illuminating a scene that would have been impossible to imagine during those dark October nights when Victor Kozlov's shadow had hung over their lives. Keisha sat cross-legged on the carpet, her school uniform neat and pressed, working on homework with the focused concentration that had become her trademark. At 8 years old, she'd grown taller, healthier, her face carrying the confident glow of a child who knew she was loved and protected. "Daddy, I finished my math problems," she announced, holding up a worksheet covered in careful calculations. "Mrs. Patterson said I'm working at a 5th grade level now." "That's my brilliant girl," Elijah said, looking up from the financial reports that had become far less important than watching his daughter flourish. Dr. Chen was right about you having an exceptional mind. The recovery process had been gradual, but remarkable. Dr. Chen continued their therapy sessions, but now they focused on processing positive experiences rather than surviving traumatic memories. Keisha's photographic memory, once a survival mechanism in an abusive environment, had become a gift that helped her excel academically and artistically. On Elijah's desk, in a place of honor, next to the military citation that had started his journey toward understanding his past, sat a document that represented their future, the amended adoption certificate that legally recognized their biological relationship while maintaining the family structure they'd chosen together. The paperwork had been complex, requiring genetic evidence, testimony from Dr. Chen about the circumstances of discovery, and legal maneuvering to address the fact that Marcus Brown had never known he was a father. But the end result was a document that told the truth. Keisha Martinez Brown was both Elijah's adopted daughter and his biological niece, family in every way that mattered. "Mr. Brown," Marcus Webb's voice came through the intercom. "Colonel, Mitchell is here for lunch." The retired colonel had become a regular presence in their lives, filling the role of surrogate grandfather with the same dedication he'd once brought to military command. His weekly visits were opportunities for Keisha to learn about her father Marcus through the stories of men who'd served alongside him. Colonel Mitchell entered the office carrying a wrapped package and wearing the slight smile that had become his trademark whenever he saw Keisha. "There's my favorite soldier," he said, kneeling down to receive her enthusiastic hug. "I'm not a soldier, Grandpa Jim. I'm going to be a doctor like Dr. Chen, so I can help other kids who have scary memories." "That's a fine ambition, young lady. Speaking of which, I brought you something that belonged to your father." He handed her the package, watching with gentle eyes as she unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a photo album filled with pictures from Marcus Brown's military service, formal portraits, candid shots with his unit, images of him helping local children during humanitarian missions. "He looks like Daddy Elijah," Keisha observed, studying a photo of her biological father in his dress uniform. "Brothers often do," Colonel Mitchell agreed, "but more importantly, he had the same heart. Your father, Marcus, spent his off-duty time building schools for children in Afghanistan. He believed that protecting kids was the most important job any soldier could have." Elijah watched his daughter absorb this information, seeing how she fit these new pieces into her understanding of her complex family history. She'd learned that having two fathers, one who'd died protecting others before she was born and one who'd survived to protect her now, didn't diminish either relationship, but rather doubled the love she'd inherited. Later that afternoon, after Colonel Mitchell had shared stories and a family lunch, Elijah found himself in the penthouse's art room, watching Keisha work on a painting. Her artistic abilities had flourished alongside her academic progress, and Dr. Chen encouraged the creative expression as therapy. This particular painting showed a mountain landscape with a large house nestled among the trees. But unlike her earlier drawings that had focused on cages and fear, this artwork depicted families playing outside, children running free, adults watching protectively from nearby. "It's the estate," she explained as Elijah sat down beside her. "But happy, the way it is now when we visit." The estate had been transformed from fortress to genuine retreat center. The defensive systems remained but were hidden. The weapons caches had been relocated to legitimate storage, and the bunker level had been converted into a game room and library. It was still secure, but now it served healing instead of warfare. "I like how you painted the families," Elijah said, noting the diverse groups of people she'd included in the scene. "Those are the other kids we're going to help," Keisha said matter-of-factly. "The ones who need safe places to remember how to be happy." She was referring to the foundation they'd established together, the Marcus Brown Memorial Fund for Traumatized Children, which provided therapy, education, and safe housing for kids who'd survived abuse. Dr. Chen served as clinical director, Colonel Mitchell handled veteran family outreach, and Keisha contributed ideas with the practical wisdom of someone who understood both trauma and recovery from personal experience. As evening approached, they sat together on the couch, reading. Keisha curled against his side with a book about ocean animals, Elijah reviewing grant proposals for the foundation. The simple domestic peace felt more valuable than any business success or military achievement from his past. "Daddy," Keisha said as he tucked her into bed that night. "Yes, Princess? I'm glad the bad men tried to hurt us." The statement was so unexpected that Elijah sat down on the edge of her bed. "Why would you say that, sweetheart?" "Because if they hadn't, we might never have found out we were real family, and then we wouldn't have known we belonged together. Forever." Looking into her serious, intelligent eyes, Elijah realized she was right. Viktor Kozlov's manipulation had inadvertently created the very outcome he'd tried to prevent, a family bond stronger than any criminal conspiracy could break. "You're absolutely right," he said, kissing her forehead. "Sometimes the worst things lead to the best things, like how storms make rainbows, exactly like that." As Keisha drifted off to sleep, Elijah stood at her bedroom window looking out over the city lights of Seattle. Somewhere out there, other children needed protection, other families needed healing, other people needed someone to stand between them and the shadows. But tonight, in this moment, his family was safe and whole and home at last.